Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Today, we're going to have a special guest. We're going to have a debate. Earlier today, I issued a challenge to a whole bunch of YouTubers, and Obsidian Radio was one of the few people that stepped forward. And we're going to debate the issue of whether or not Black people should support the Republican Party and Donald Trump in particular. I've been waiting for this chance to have a one-on-one dialogue about this issue. But before we get started, I want to give Obsidian Radio an opportunity to introduce himself, to let people know about his channels, to let them know what his channel is all about. So with that, I'll let Obsidian go ahead and introduce himself. So tell the people about your channel, what you're all about and everything.
Hey, what's going on, man? My channel, Obsidian Radio, the voice of the everyday brother, got started 3.5 years ago, summer 2015. And it is a daily podcast show that focuses on the issues that matter to the everyday brother and the thinking Black man. One of the unofficial mottos of the show is Thinking Black Man's Radio. Some assembly is required. And we've been going strong now for 3.5 years. Got some big plans going into 2019. And really been having a great time. And Black male media is very important. And we all should support it.
Okay. And so you mentioned, in a couple of comments and some of your dialogues that you are a Trump supporter, you're a supporter of the Republican Party. Can you let people know, how did you come to become a Republican? Why did you decide to become a Republican? And why do you support Donald Trump?
Okay, before I go into any of that, I just want it to be known right now that as of right now, it could change. Hopefully it will. But New Possibilities earlier today put out an open challenge, and he named names. You can go and see the video for yourself and hear all the names. And he openly challenged all of them, both on the left and the right, if you will, for a sit down. I want it to be noted right now, thus far, I'm the only one that showed up. The Black Republican, the Black Trump guy. I'm the only one that showed up. All these other folks didn't show up. I just want that to be known off top. Secondarily, me and New Possibilities definitely agree that Black folks are Americans and that we have just as much a right to participate in American life as anyone else. So he and I are in agreement with this idea of no voting. That's ridiculous. So we agree on that. Now, to answer your question, New Possibilities, with regard to how it came to be that I'm a Republican and a Trump supporter in particular. First, to the Republican part. That was already in my family. My grandfather was a stomped down Ike man. That is to say, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Allied Forces commander in World War II. I like Ike when he ran for president in 1950s. He was a big supporter of Ike. So that's nothing new. I learned about Rush Limbaugh from my granddad. When I came right out of high school and was grandfathered into my very first union job right out of high school, when I would ride in to work with my granddad, we would be listening to Paul Harvey and Rush Limbaugh. So that's how I got turned on to what you could say conservative ideas, or the right, if you will. So that's number one. Number two, with regard to Trump, very easy. I got sick and tired of the left, and in particular, the Black left. I was not impressed with Barack Obama's performance as president. I have nothing personal against him. I think that what Joe Wilson did to him, the congressman shouting out, "You lie," and all that sort of thing, I thought that was out of line and racist, to tell you the truth. I didn't appreciate that. I didn't appreciate what the Tea Party was doing with regard to Obama along racial lines. I thought that was out of bounds. Nevertheless, I wasn't impressed with Obama's performance. I got tired of the social justice warrior culture. Pat Buchanan was right back in the 90s to say and predict that we were in a culture war. He was correct. Look at what we got going on right now. Me Too, social justice warriorism, all of the abuses of political correctness, etc., etc., etc. I got tired of that. And Trump is a big pushback and rebuke of all of that. So that was one of the major reasons why I supported him. Because he's one of the few guys left in America that is actually a guy. And unapologetically so.
All right, so let me just respond to a couple of things that you said. So you were talking about your grandfather being a Republican, and that's part of the reason why you became a Republican. You talked about how you're sick of the left and you weren't impressed with Obama, and you said that you were tired of the social justice movement, like in terms of the black left, and Donald Trump is a pushback against that, and that's part of the reason why you support him.
Right.
But let me ask you this: I mean, how can you support Donald Trump, a man who is openly hostile to the interests of African Americans? This is a man who openly supported racial profiling. He said that. He's on record supporting racial profiling. This is a man who supports stop and frisk.
When did he say that? May I ask when he said that?
He said it during his campaign trail, and he said it in the last month or so, that he supports racial profiling.
Okay.
This man is on record saying that we need New York style stop and frisk in places like Chicago. Right. New York style stop and frisk was a program where New York police would randomly stop Black men in certain communities based on where they lived and based on the color of their skin.
Okay.
That program was found to be unconstitutional by a federal court.
Okay.
So Donald Trump supports that. It was found to be discriminatory, but despite that, Donald Trump supports that.
And I support it too.
What were you saying?
I support that.
So, I mean, how can you as a Black man support stop and frisk? First of all, one of the things that they found out is that most of the people who were stopped and frisked, the overwhelming majority of them were not violating the law. Okay. They did not have weapons on them or drugs on them or any other kind of contraband on them. Right. And they were subjected to humiliation based on their race and based on what neighborhood that they lived in. How can any rational Black man support police harassment of Black people?
Because the murder rate in my hometown right now in Philadelphia is through the roof. I was just watching a fellow Black YouTuber who also happens to be from my hometown of Philly. He's from Southwest Philly. I was born in North Philly, raised in the Mount Airy Germantown section of Philadelphia. George Mason hails from Southwest Philly, which has long been a den of iniquity and murder and mayhem in the Black precincts. The 19143 zip code, I invite anybody listening right now to look it up for themselves. They just had a quadruple homicide out there at the 5100 block of Malcolm Street. 4 people, 2 women, 2 men, tied up in the basement, shot in the head.
All right, so I understand that there's crime in certain communities without a doubt, but you should not, the political system, the police system, they should not resort to a system of collective punishment and humiliation. Many of those people who were stopped and harassed by the police are innocent. The entire community shouldn't be punished because of the activities of a criminal minority within that community.
I would much rather be harassed by police than killed in my own house, shot in the head. This is what happens in the Black precincts across America.
Right, but
Chicago, Detroit, Newark, Houston, New Orleans, Camden, Philly, Baltimore, you name it. It is chaos.
Hold on. We understand that violence is an issue. But my point is that innocent people who have not committed a crime shouldn't be randomly stopped by the police, harassed by the police, searched by the police, humiliated by the police.
But I find it interesting, new possibilities, that all of this mayhem goes on day in and day out, and you don't say a word about it on none of your channels.
No, I do say a word about it. I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that in a second. But I'm just saying that you had a court of law find that that was discrimination. And here you are as a Black man out of fear supporting discrimination against yourself and your community.
So what is your solution, New Possibility? Again, when have you been outraged about any of this? When have you been outraged?
Hold on, I've done plenty of videos.
Such as?
I've done plenty of videos.
When the last time you done a live stream bemoaning the rampant murder of black people by other black people? When did you do it?
Hold on, calm down for a second and we can talk about it. I want us to have a civilized conversation.
Oh, now you want to be civil, but you going ham on Donald Trump, but you ain't going ham on these murderers in our midst.
Hold on, just calm down. I don't want to have to mute you or anything in this debate, but I'm just saying this. First of all, I've done plenty of videos about inner city violence. I've done videos about the shooting of a 7-year-old girl here in Baltimore. I've done videos about the killing of a kid in Chicago. I've done plenty of videos about the inner city violence that takes place in Chicago, Baltimore, and other inner cities. Anybody can check my resume on here and they know that I've dealt with the issue of inner city violence.
I'm looking up right now as you talk.
I've also addressed, this false narrative that's put out here by people like yourself that basically present this idea that black people don't care about inner city violence and we only care about police brutality. Here in Baltimore, we have groups like Ceasefire that are fighting against inner city violence. We have groups like the 300-man march that have stood up against inner city violence. In places like Chicago, you have other groups, the interveners that are against inner city violence.
Completely ineffective.
In Detroit, you have the Detroit 300 that were against
completely ineffective. As a matter of fact, the Detroit 300 was shut down by black women. Something else we got to talk about. Continue.
Yeah, so those are examples of people fighting against inner city violence. I cited some examples of me speaking out against inner city violence. So that's not the only issue. But let me go back to Donald Trump and his policies that are detrimental to black people. Another thing is Donald Trump's administration doesn't view police brutality as a priority. They dismissed it, through his. And
you don't view that violence as a priority. I'm looking at the front page of your channel right now, and in the last 2 weeks, not a peep about black murder or about black murder of black people by other black people. Not a peep, MP. Where is it? Show me.
I've done video after video.
Not on this channel, you haven't. Not in the past 2 weeks, you haven't. 3 weeks. W.S. Robert Bowers killed 11 people at a Pittsburgh synagogue. That was 3 weeks ago.
Right, I did a video on that as well. Hold on 1 second. I gotta adjust something. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, something's wrong with my settings, but yeah, I've done a video about the shooting that took place at the synagogue. I've done videos on multiple acts of violence that have happened around this country.
So why can't I see any of those black on black crimes on your front page within the last 3 weeks? Why is there nothing there? There's something here about Cynthia G, something here about Viola Davis, something here about Don Lemon, more about stuff about Candace Owens and Anthony Brian Logan, stuff about Ben Jealous, but there's nothing about the murder. And by the way, the murders in your hometown have shot through the roof in the past few months. I just covered that on my other channel over at the Black Avenger within the last month. Not a peep from you on that, on this channel.
Again, I'm just going to emphasize this again. I have plenty of videos that deal with inner city violence on my channel.
Not within the last 3 weeks, you don't.
I have to
what
check.
What does that say about your priorities? This is what your priorities are. Racism, and the white man. And black people who disagree with me are coons, sellouts, and all the rest of it. That is your priority, not black people.
Look, see, you're trying to deflect from the subject. I mean,
no, I'm not. No, I'm not. We're talking about murder.
You gotta quit.
We're talking about black people getting murdered. And you're not talking about it on your own channel.
I talk about it all the time.
No, you don't. You don't talk about it within the last 3 weeks. I'm not lying. Anybody listening can see it for themselves. Go and type up New Possibilities.
See, I mean, we can have this dialogue, but we're not going to have it where you're like talking over me and stuff like that. I just want to be perfectly clear on that. We're going to have this dialogue, but we have to have a civilized dialogue. Let's have you say what you have to say, then I say what I have to say. Now, before I unmute you, I'm going to make this point that I was making before. I said that, the the Trump administration has made it clear that inner city violence is there. You know, they want to deflect to inner city violence. They have made it clear that police brutality is not a priority to them. As far as they're concerned, that's a local issue. You know, it's not a priority. Under Trump's Justice Department, they no longer have emphasized the need for entering consent decrees with police departments that, you know, engage in discriminatory practices that target Black communities. Instead, they have, you know, basically said that they're not going to do that, that they're not going to try to enter consent decrees with these police departments. They don't see police brutality as an issue, despite the fact that you have all these killings of Black people. And we can name all the names of all these people: Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Sam DuBose, Walter Scott, all these Black people killed by police. And as far as this Trump administration is concerned, that's not a priority. Now, I've cited over and over again, you know, to address this deflection that you're trying to raise, I've cited how I have plenty of videos on my channel dealing with inner city violence. So that deflection doesn't fly over here. So I'm going to put you back on and, you know, let's have a civilized conversation. You know, I'm not going to allow anybody to talk over me or run over me on my own platform. So let's be perfectly clear about that. You say what you have to say, then I respond, and vice versa. We're not going to have a filibustering session here. So I'm going to unmute you and you can respond to that point. Like, how can any Black man support an administration that doesn't view police brutality as a priority?
Very easy. Because it's not my first concern. I don't have to worry about police brutality because I've never been harassed by the police. It's not my concern. My concern is what happened over there on 5100 Malcolm Street. My concern is what happens in your own city where your own Black police commissioner has to take everybody off of desk duty and put them on the street because of the chaos that has ensued since that ingrate Freddie Gray was killed. That's what I'm talking about. Stuff that doesn't concern you. How can any self-respecting Black man not use his platform to talk about that? That's what I ask you. Possibilities.
First of all, I talk about that all the time.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
All somebody has to do is check. I mean, for all the people listening, all I challenge you to do is go to my channel and look at my videos. You will see videos when they're addressing inner city violence as well as police brutality, despite what Obsidian is saying. And the fact of the matter is, the police can attack any of us. You know, just because you live a certain lifestyle, you live in a certain community, that doesn't make you immune from racial profiling.
I've never been harassed by the police, period.
I mean, you can dismiss it all you want, but
I am dismissing it. It's not an issue. And I'm going to tell you the reason why it's not an issue.
For themselves. I mean, the fact of the matter is, Black men make up 6% of the U.S. population. And according to a study that was done by the Washington Post in 2015, Black men account for 40% of the unarmed people killed by the police. If that is not something that's important to you, I don't know what else to say.
You know what's important to me? Black men killing other Black men. And I notice you don't talk about that. You don't talk about that.
I don't talk about
You don't talk about Black men killing other Black men at an alarming rate. You don't talk about that.
Again, I've said it over and over again, and my videos speak for themselves. All people have to do is check the videos. Now, the next thing
check the videos. In 3 weeks, he hasn't said a word about what's going on in his own home backyard. In 3 weeks, look at the videos on the front page of New Possibilities and see it for yourself.
3 weeks can't sum up everything that I cover on my channel. I mean, I have plenty of videos dealing with inner city violence, and people can check that for themselves instead of just relying on my word or Obsidian's word. Just check my resume for yourself. But the other issue that I want to move on to is the Trump administration weaponizing the Justice Department against affirmative action. They want to wipe out affirmative action. How can any rational Black man, how can any rational Black man support the end of affirmative action when so many Black people benefit from affirmative action? If it wasn't for affirmative action, I wouldn't be an attorney today. If there wasn't for affirmative action, many people, even Clarence Uncle Thomas, wouldn't be a Supreme Court justice if it wasn't for affirmative action. Affirmative action has opened many doors to many African Americans in this country. And you have this Trump administration that wants to end affirmative action for Black people, thereby reducing opportunity for African Americans. How can any rational Black man support a party that's opposed to affirmative action?
I'm opposed to affirmative action. Affirmative action never played a role in my life. And I think that affirmative action has been and is today something that's completely ruinous to Black folks. Most Black folks don't have the talent and don't have the ability to cut it. And the only way they could do it is through affirmative action. That's the only way they could cut it.
First of all,
I made it without affirmative action, and that's the way it should be. Get rid of it. If you got the talent and the ability, no amount of racism will hold it back. None.
First
talent
of all,
wins in the end. Talent and hard work wins.
See, I think that's like, that sounds good and everything.
No, because it is good. It does work.
As I said before, let's allow each other to finish our statements and then respond to each other. I'll extend the same courtesy to you. I won't interrupt you, and I'll expect the same from you. So, the bottom line is, affirmative action is not about just giving somebody something without them earning it or working for it. It's about opening doors of opportunity. And most affirmative action programs work out so that race is one of several factors considered, for instance, in someone's admission to college. It doesn't guarantee equal results. It guarantees an opportunity for certain people that are able to get into certain universities. So they're not guaranteed certain grades or certain admissions, for instance, to law review and stuff like that. It's just an opportunity. The rest is up to the person once they get in. In fact, they don't just get in because of the color of their skin. Most of the people that get into these universities that are African American that benefit from affirmative action, they are well credentialed, well qualified, and well educated. And one thing that is people neglect to mention in this whole thing about opportunity and all that kind of stuff, they neglect to mention that the history that African Americans have gone through that set them back from other races of people. Here we were a people enslaved for hundreds of years, and a people that were subjected to Jim Crow for decades. We have only had civil rights in this country, legalized civil rights where we have, equal rights under the law for like 60 years. And to expect people under those conditions to be on a level playing field and be able to equally compete with these people is an exaggeration. It's like all kinds of obstacles have been placed in our way, and these people want to whine and cry about affirmative action, which only considers, race as one of several factors in admissions to colleges and universities. And it's like, how can you support closing the doors of opportunity to many people in the African American community? How can you co-sign that? And the fact of the matter is, like, you talk about your individual situation. I don't know if you're a college educated person or not.
Nope.
It's my understanding that I think you're a working class man or whatever. So your route to success is a different route than other people who have taken. Many people want to go to college, and oftentimes, they have affirmative action for white people, which comes in the form of legacy preferences and all that kind of stuff. In terms of people having access to certain wealth and stuff like that, that makes it easier for them to get into these schools. So affirmative action is just one measure to try to level the playing field. And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't go far enough. How can you as a Black man oppose affirmative action?
Is my mic on?
Yeah, your mic is on. You can.
Okay. So first of all, if we follow the logic that white folks have affirmative action, therefore Black folks should have affirmative action. That's bad logic. If affirmative action is wrong, and for me, I say it's wrong no matter who's doing it, then because white people doing it doesn't make it justify that Black folks should do it. That's number one. Number two, there are many Asians in society who are rightly pissed off that Blacks and Hispanics are being pushed to the front of the line with lesser qualifications than they are. Nobody is acing these meritocratic tests like the SAT, the GRE, the MCAT, GCAT, and all the rest of it the way that Asians are. Matter of fact, my understanding is that some of the cases coming up on affirmative action will feature some Asian students. So there's that. And number 3, no black person that's got the skills and ability need worry about affirmative action. Is there affirmative action in the NFL? Is there affirmative action in the NBA? No. And we all know the reason why. Because the best guys with the most talent just happen to be black. In my case, you talked about me. I know all about the unions. I know all about unions. All about how white folks get the white men get those union jobs and pass them along to their sons and stuff like that. It didn't stop me. You want to know why? Because I outworked everybody else, and I was smart. I'm living proof that if you have the talent and the ability and you're willing to bust your ass, you will make it. You will. No amount of racism will hold that back. And you want to know why that is? Because white folks love green a whole lot more than they hate black.
All right, so my response to that is simple. I mean, it's like your whole analysis ignores like the systemic inequality in terms of the quality of education that black students receive in urban areas compared to affluent white neighborhoods. It doesn't take into that into account. And in terms of the NBA, that's more of a meritocracy than the larger society. I mean, it's based on what kind of skills and talent somebody brings to the table. A lot of times in terms of, educational opportunities and things of that nature, it's based on the resources that your parents have, based on what kind of neighborhood and quality schools your children can afford to go to. And that has nothing to do with like somebody's natural abilities or talent. Like a lot of times people are able to overcome despite being in these environments that hold them back in many ways, because affirmative action opened the door for them, because they had mentors and other things in place to help them out. So that's my whole position on affirmative action. I don't understand how any black man could be supporting closing doors of opportunity to black people and making it harder for black people to get education. We know that in many of those states, for instance, where they ended affirmative action, the numbers of black people enrolling in college substantially declined. And that's something that I cannot support under any circumstances. And I don't understand how a black man can be on here advocating for a group of people, some Asians, over their own people. And my argument wasn't, that I support affirmative action because white people had affirmative action. My argument is that, affirmative action is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it promotes diversity in higher education and in the workplace. Number two, it helps address the past discrimination that our people faced. So that's one thing. And, I don't understand like how you can support Donald Trump, a man who is opposed to social programs that benefit black communities in a disproportionate way. Like Donald Trump is talking about getting rid of Section 8 for poor people, like making it harder for poor people to get housing. Also, he's talked about getting rid of food stamps, food assistance for poor people, cutting back on student aid for poor students that need Pell Grants and things of that nature, and student loans to go to college. Also talking about getting rid of Head Start programs that benefit poor young children, that don't have access to certain types of quality pre-K because of their economic circumstances. How is you as a black man can support the erosion of those social programs that substantially
cut them off. Cut them off. They are destroying the black family. The welfare state has done what the Klan, what slavery, and what Jim Crow couldn't do, and that's destroy the black family. Cut it off. Cut it off. All of the crime, chaos, you name it, is coming from baby mamaism. Those 4 people that got shot up in Southwest Philly, guess where they came from? Guess how that happened? The perps running around, they didn't come from solidly middle-class homes like Family Matters in the 90s. These are people coming from baby mama homes. That's where they're coming from. We need to cut it off where it breeds and lives. Cut it off. Human beings are based on incentives. If you cut off the incentives, they'll change their behavior. Cut it off.
All right. So my response to that is simple. I mean, first of all, you're blaming these social programs for the crime. The crime is a result of poverty. And that's something that your president, the man that you support, has no plan of addressing the problem of poverty in Black communities.
Not true.
Poverty generates the crime. It's
not true.
Section 8. Section 8 is not generating the crime.
Not true.
Poverty, food assistance is not generating the crime. If you cut those programs, you think crime is bad now. Wait till you see a situation where people have no food or no housing. They will be forced to engage in criminal activity to survive, even more forced than they are today. So, I don't buy into this argument that, that social justice, social programs are to blame for the crime in our community. I mean, how is Head Start to blame for inner city violence? How is funding Pell Grants to blame for inner city violence? Also, this Trump administration is talking about getting rid of healthcare programs, Obamacare, for instance, that is flawed, but ensured many people disproportionately who are African American and Black communities. How can you support a policy to get rid of, healthcare for many people who are African American? I mean, how do you support that? How do you support an administration that openly panders to white supremacists?
Hold on a second. Who is openly pandering to who now? Show me the evidence.
I mean, you have so many examples of Donald Trump.
Give me 3 of them.
Yeah, I'll give you some examples. Number one, after Charlottesville, where you had those white nationalists hold that hate rally there. You had somebody killed at that rally. You had white supremacists shooting into a crowd of people, beating people, beating an African American to the point where his head was gashed and blood was pouring down his face.
Right.
You had these hate mongers demonstrating to maintain symbols of hate, like these Confederate symbols. And while all that stuff was going on, after that event happened, instead of harshly condemning those white supremacists, you had Donald Trump talking about there were some very fine people on both sides.
Yes, he was talking about Antifa, which is violent.
That's for 3 examples. So that's one example.
No, hold on a second. Antifa was violent. They are violent. They use violence to get across their points. They drive people from speaking using violence. That's what he was talking about.
And I'm going to present those 3 examples, then you can respond. The other thing is this, not only that, Donald Trump called himself a nationalist, and people have to look beyond the surface. We know that there's a white nationalist movement in this country. And we know that that was basically a signal to those white supremacists that he is with them. Also, Donald Trump took, when he was asked about David Duke supporting him, this man went out of his way to pretend like he didn't know who David Duke was. He didn't harshly condemn David Duke. In fact, he provided cover for him. It's no coincidence that white supremacists support Donald Trump. The KKK endorsed him. The alt-right endorsed him. When Donald Trump was elected, the alt-right held a conference in the DC area, and to celebrate his election, they were doing Nazi salutes. So that's 2 examples of Donald Trump, pandering to these people. Donald Trump regularly panders to these people in his rhetoric against immigration when he talks about an invasion, when he talks about these, opposing the immigrants and all that kind of stuff and building that wall and making America great again. All of that is pandering to these white supremacists. That slogan, "Make America Great Again," is a slogan that basically means make America white again. And, his whole anti-immigrant stance is a stance that supports this idea that, that these brown immigrants present, some kind of existential threat to white society. They fear the browning of America. They fear white genocide. And this whole anti-immigrant sentiment is his way of pandering to that far right. His statements about, so that's one, those are the 3 examples.
All right, so let me respond to them. First, let's look at it this way. If Trump is so virulently racist, how do you explain the fact that 15% of black men voted for him in 2016, and since then, according to the NAACP and Rasmussen polls, the support from black men for Donald Trump has gone up even higher, depending on who you believe, is somewhere between 25 and 40%. How do you explain that? If he's such a virulent people of color, anti-black, if he's so virulently in support of white supremacists, how do you explain support for Donald Trump among black men has increased? How do you explain it?
Yeah, that's the question I have for you. That's what I'm saying to you.
Because he's not.
I laid out,
but because Trump is for protecting black men by getting rid of these illegal aliens.
You asked for examples of his racism, examples of him pandering to white supremacists. I laid out 3, and your response is, the fact that some ignorant Negroes support him.
Oh, okay, hold it. They have to be ignorant. They have to be ignorant. They can't be there voting for their own interests. Let me tell you something, New Possibilities. Maybe you don't know what it's like to deal with illegal immigrants trying to take your job, but I do. It happened to me. And it didn't work, thank God. You want to know why? Because I was smart and hardworking, and because of that, I was able to keep my job. But they tried.
So, I mean, what is your response to those blatant examples of pandering to white supremacy?
I'm explaining to you right now. Your argument is that Trump is a virulent racist. My response is that the reason why I and millions of other black men supported Trump is because he's protecting our interests as Americans.
And, that brings me to another thing real quick. I want to address this whole immigrant issue, and I'm going to do it by sharing my screen real quick. Let me just share my screen. 1 second. Just bear with me a second. So, I mean, a lot of people keep raising this issue of anti-immigrant sentiment, like as if that benefits black people and all that kind of stuff. But this article right here cites a study that was done at the University of Pennsylvania Business School, where they point out how basically how they found that an increase in labor supply resulting from immigration actually generates more employment in industries such as home construction and food consumption. By more people coming to the United States, that generates a greater need for goods and services, thereby creating more jobs. And this also points out how existing data simply does not support any definitive correlation between the stark unemployment rate of African Americans and the employment of recent immigrants. So this study points this out, and anybody can look it up. There's a link on this article from News One to an article on Vox, and there's a link to the actual study, so people can look it up. An anecdotal statement about your individual experiences is no substitute for evidence.
Oh, really, really, really? So let me get this straight. My lived experience as a black man doesn't count because it doesn't say what you want it to say. Oh, I got it. So my life being on the line in a car accident several years ago caused on I-95 by an illegal immigrant driving a commercial truck, couldn't speak the language, didn't understand the stop signs and stuff, and caused a 10-car pileup on a major thoroughfare. That doesn't count. No, that doesn't count. My job being on the line from Manny Moe and Jack from south of the border, that doesn't count. But a left-wing study, quote unquote, does count. One.
Let me just say this. First of all, I'm not diminishing your experience with that illegal immigrant. First of all, I'll say this, man. I mean, what happens oftentimes, with these Trump supporters, they'll take one worst case scenario and use that to stereotype an entire group of people. Use that to suggest that all illegal immigrants are up to no good, all illegal immigrants are criminals, or all illegal immigrants are taking jobs and all that kind of stuff.
They are criminals.
That is no different.
That's why they call them illegal immigrants. It's criminal.
Hold on. That is no different from, people stereotyping black men, for instance, saying, well, because this individual black man robbed this white woman, that all black men are dangerous. because this individual black man or this group of small individuals engage in the drug trade, then all black men engage in drug trade, then all black men are violent. That's the kind of stereotype that leads to black men being killed by these police. And, you know, it's like, it's odd to see people who are victims of stereotyping and racism embrace racism and stereotyping. So, you know, that's one of the problems that I have with the Trump administration. And again, you know, I know we see differently, you know, things differently with respect to this immigration issue. But the other issue that
my personal, so hold it, stop. So my personal experience as a tradesman, because remember, Trump's support was among the so-called deplorables. That's what Hillary Clinton called them, a basket of deplorables. See, that doesn't matter. And that's the reason why Trump was so successful, because he spoke to the interests of men like me. I'm a tradesman and been one all my life. And I saw firsthand what illegal immigration can do to the trades. I saw it firsthand. And all of a sudden, that doesn't count anymore. Well, you see what happened with that. Trump won and Hillary got her ass spanked.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like there are many black people that are workers who are in unions and stuff like that who support, you know, who did not support Donald Trump. Many of them didn't. Like many of the unions opposed Donald Trump. So, and many black people who are in union support, you know, oppose Donald Trump as well. So, like, don't present it like you represent like the majority of black people.
I didn't say I represented the majority of black people. I never said
even a large segment. So, you know, so
I never said that.
The other thing that I want to say is that, you know, Hillary Clinton's characterization of Donald Trump supporters is right and exact, because a lot of these people are racist. That's well documented that a lot of Donald Trump's supporters are racist.
No, it's not well documented. What crosses have they burnt?
What do you say? I mean, it's
Donald Trump isn't Woodrow Wilson in a century ago hosting the Klan at the White House?
I mean, let's talk about current times. I mean, first of all, Richard Spencer supports Donald Trump. David Duke supports Donald Trump.
So
the KKK supports Donald Trump.
So
alt-right supports Donald Trump.
So
neo-Nazis support Donald Trump.
So
if that's not a basket of deplorables, I don't know what is.
But did Donald Trump come out and endorse any of these guys? No. In fact, according to the New York Times, he denounced all of them. New York Times newspaper, bastion of the left. They reported it.
Like Donald Trump took a long time denouncing.
Oh, now, okay. So now all of a sudden, because he don't do it as quickly as you like, now that means he really is in bed with him. Come on, man. You read it. Black men have supported Trump. He's not a racist. I'm sorry, he's not. Get used to the idea that there are black people who think differently than you. See, this is the problem with the left right now. They can't accept that there are black people who think differently than you. Get over it.
All right, so let me say this. First of all, Donald Trump, again, he had the support of those people. If those people are not deplorables, I don't know who are deplorables. If those people aren't deplorables, you have people at his rallies that engage in violence against black people. If that's not deplorable, I don't know what is deplorable. Donald Trump, you know, has a history of racism, not only the things that I've already cited. This is a man who was sued twice by the Justice Department for housing discrimination. You know, the Justice Department, they're not some avalanche chasers. These are people that thoroughly investigate cases. You know, they conduct testing before they bring cases. And they sued this man twice for housing discrimination. He didn't want to rent to your black ass or to black people, period. But yet here you are on here caping for Donald Trump.
And you're de facto caping for Hillary.
No, I'm not. I'm not caping for
All right, who did you vote for then?
I didn't vote for Hillary. I voted.
Who did you vote for? You know who I voted for. Who did you vote for?
I'll answer your question. As you know, people that are familiar with my channel know that I supported Bernie Sanders during the primary. Once he lost the primary, once he lost the primary, I voted for Jill Stein for president. So I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I have plenty of videos on there explaining why I don't support Hillary Clinton. And the record is clear. Again, people can check this channel and see my record. Like, I don't just support somebody because they're a Democrat. or because they belong to this party or that party. I look at their political agenda. That's what I weigh. I look at their track record. And that's the reason why I couldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. But, again, this Donald Trump has the support of, these deplorables that I've cited before. This man has a history of discrimination against Black people, sued twice by the Justice Department. This is the man who said that the reason why Black people don't support him is because they're stupid, basically. His own attorney said that this was what Donald Trump has said. He's been quoted as saying that he doesn't want Black people counting his money.
I would agree with that.
He doesn't want Black people counting his money. This is what
I would agree. I would agree with what he said with regard to Black folks being stupid. And you want to know why?
You
like to know why?
You can tell me why, but let me just finish what I was.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me finish my points about statements that he's made. So he said that Black people are too stupid to support him. This man has said he doesn't want Black people counting his money. This man has said that that Black football players who participate in those national anthem protests are sons of bitches. This man referred to a Black woman as a dog. He referred to another reporter as stupid, a Black woman reporter as stupid, as asking a lot of stupid questions. He called another prominent, well-known Black journalist a loser. This man called a woman a racist for simply asking him, why is he emboldening race? Is he emboldening racists by referring to him as himself as a nationalist? So you have this track record of Donald Trump. This is a man that took out a full-page ad in a New York magazine calling for the death penalty to be imposed against the African American men who were wrongfully accused of the Central Park rape. And to this day, he has not apologized to them. This is the man that's on record saying racist thing after racist thing, but yet and still you have people like yourself to defend him. And I don't understand.
And you're defending Hillary Clinton's the basket of deplorables comment. Yet you voted for Stein, you voted for Bernie Sanders, and she didn't apologize for that remark either. So we're even, bro. We're even.
How are we even when I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton?
No, but you supported what she said.
I supported her statement about the basket of deplorables.
Okay, so we're even.
Exact. But I don't.
So we're even. You supported that.
Or unlike
you supported it.
Unlike you, I don't support Hillary's policies that have been detrimental to the Black community. You're on record saying that you support Donald Trump.
I support his policies because they've helped Black men economically. That's a fact.
You're actually on record defending him, calling Black people stupid. This is
yeah. And let me tell you the reason why I say that. What do you call a group of people who continues to vote for a party year in and year out, and the place gets worse and worse and worse? Sharp James in Newark, Coleman Young to Kwame Kilpatrick in Detroit. We've had 3 Black mayors here in the city of Philadelphia, 2 of whom were utterly out of pocket. One dropped a bomb on his own people. The other had an FBI probe investigating corruption around him. Everybody in his administration was corrupt. What do you call all of that? The list goes on in Black America.
Okay, so I'll respond.
And interestingly enough, y'all guys who claim to love Black folks so much, y'all never talk about it. Shaka do nothing, good for nothing for Ty here in the city of Philadelphia. His entire family was corrupt. Him, his son, and his wife. Not a peep from you. Not a peep.
First of all, I'll address a couple of things. First of all, obviously, I don't support any kind of corruption of any type. That's off the top. I mean, that's just common sense. Nobody supports that. The second thing I'll say is this, man. There is a reason why African Americans support Democrats over Republicans. And some of the reasons are cited, I cited earlier. The Democrats, are more, they have a record of supporting civil rights legislation. And after civil rights legislation was passed, you had the Republican Party basically implement a Southern strategy where they decided to openly pander to white racists to win over some of those Dixiecrats. So a lot of those Democrats that you all say were Klansmen and stuff like that, they became Republicans. It is no coincidence that most of the South is dominated by Republicans because the Republican Party openly panders to white racists. And all someone has to do is look up an interview that Lee Atwater did about the Southern strategy here on YouTube, where he explains this whole strategy of openly pandering to white races. The GOP has adopted a policy that's openly hostile to Black people, whether it's attacking affirmative action, whether it's forcefully, strongly supporting so-called law and order that results in more police brutality and racial profile in the Black communities, whether it's cutting back on vital social programs that I mentioned earlier, in the name, they try to put a Black face on welfare and all these other social.
But that's a correct face, because Black women require more public assistance.
Again, don't
for women at like 30%.
You can make your point after I make mine. So you have this open hostility. And when all you have to do is compare the Obama administration to this Trump administration. That brings me to your point about Obama, not being impressed by Obama. Obama did far more things than Donald Trump could ever dream of for the Black community.
Such as?
Obama, plenty of things. Like, first of all, he entered consent decrees with the Baltimore Police Department, the Ferguson Police Department, to end discriminatory policing practices in Black communities.
So, which explains why in your home city right now, the murder rate is through the roof.
First of all, that's a separate issue from.
Oh, yeah, it's a separate issue.
So let me just run through the things that Obama did compared to the man you support. So Obama supported those consent decrees, investigated those police departments. Okay. Obama defended affirmative action in Fisher versus the University of Texas. Obama defended voting rights in the case of Shelby County versus Holder, where they basically gutted the Voting Rights Act. Obama's administration defended voting rights in Texas to get rid of, that voter ID law that was highly restrictive and disproportionately impacted Black communities. And, if you look at Obama's criminal justice policy in terms of, trying to get rid of mandatory minimums for nonviolent drug offenders, an issue that helped lead to the mass incarceration of many nonviolent offenders. He tried to address that. Your man, Donald Trump, rescinded all those types of reforms when he got into office. Obama granted clemency to many nonviolent offenders, many of whom were African American. Obama supported the Brothers Keeper program. Obama supported,
which was shut down by Black feminists, I might add.
Obama supported the Fair Sentencing Act and reduced the sentencing disparity between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, a program that benefited African American communities. Obama passed an executive order calling for excellence in Black education. So those are some things that Obama has done, and when you compare that to Donald Trump's administration, there's no comparison. And then the biggest thing that Obama did was help reduce the unemployment rate in the Black community. The unemployment rate has been on a steady decline because of policies that Obama implemented during his time in the White House. And that's well documented in an article on Forbes website, proving that Obama is responsible for the declining unemployment rate in the Black community. The unemployment rate in the Black community is at its lowest point in a very long time. And, that's because of policies that Obama did. So how can somebody say that they're not impressed with that? This is the man who spoke out. Like, he didn't speak out as often as I would like to have done, but he spoke out in the Trayvon Martin case. He talked about how if he had a son,
which wasn't a concern for me. Go ahead.
Trayvon, he would be like Trayvon Martin.
That wasn't a concern for me, but go ahead.
He also spoke out on, the situation involving Professor Henry Louis Gates.
Again, not a concern for me, but go ahead.
Of racism in society. Even though he, again, didn't speak out as often as I would like him to, he addressed the issue of race in this society. Unlike a Donald Trump who defended these races and, caped for these races.
Well, no, he didn't defend any racists. No, he didn't defend any racists, man. He didn't defend any racists. That's your opinion. That's your opinion. It's not a fact.
First of all, I'll be clear, like the people, when Donald Trump talked about that there were some very fine people in there, the racists got the message.
No, that's your opinion. That's not a fact.
not an opinion. This is something.
It is an opinion.
This is something.
Yes, your opinion. And here's the thing, man. I don't begrudge you having an opinion, but don't try to present it like it's a fact. It's your opinion.
I'm going to establish how it's a fact. First of all, you have white supremacists who were cheering the fact that Donald Trump referred to them as white, as some very fine people. There are white supremacists on record saying that he was giving them a signal or showing his support to them. There's all kinds of records, and I will put links to those articles in the description box after this video uploads, so that people can see it for themselves. There are white supremacists that are on record basically saying that Trump is promoting their agenda, but yet you have people like yourself that refuse to see that truth. You want to talk about like black people leaving a plantation, but yet you're going to a place that's a place full of white supremacists like Richard Spencer, David Duke, and all these other people. And the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump had a white nationalist on his staff as his chief political.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. New possibility. Let me ask you a question. All right. What is the single biggest problem facing black people today?
I mean, there are a wide range of
Give me the single biggest problem. One, what's the single biggest problem black folks should marshal all their resources to get straightened out? What is it?
I mean, one of the key problems is education opportunities. Another one is poverty. And, all these problems that you want to talk about, the inner city violence and all that kind of stuff, that stems from a lack of opportunity. If these brothers that participate in the drug trade and participate in the violence that you people complain, be so concerned about, if they had education, if they had opportunity, if they had legitimate jobs that they could work, they would be doing that.
Let me ask you a question.
Manage those opportunities.
Let me ask you a question. See, I think the number one problem that you think that faces black people based on our conversation at present is racism. And that's what most black people think. That's what most black people think. Most black people think today in 2018 that the single biggest problem facing black folks is racism. Now, let me tell you what I think the single biggest problem facing black people today is. And that ties right into our discussion right now about Trump, the elections, black folks. It's that black men and black women don't get along. That is the basis for why we don't have families. That is the basis for why the black marital rate is at its lowest point since U.S. Census records were kept in the late 19th century. That's the single biggest problem that explains the crime. That's the single biggest problem that explains the need for all of these nanny state programs. That's the single biggest problem. But isn't it interesting that the Democrat Party, that people on the left, that black folks like yourself, you never talk about the family. Only Republicans talk about it, the so-called racists. But you never talk about families. Why is that? Why is that?
First of all, I talk about family all the time. I talk about like the need for a strong nuclear family on my channel. Like my channel is not focused on the relationships like your channel is, but I do talk about the issue.
That's the basis of any family, is it not?
Yeah, the family is the basis of the community and all.
Wait a minute. Well, what's the basis of a family? What is that?
Obviously, a man and a woman.
Okay, so if men and women don't get along and they can't form families, or if they do, they're broken up shortly thereafter, what kind of community do we have? And ultimately, what kind of nation do we have?
Right. So first of all, I don't dispute your argument about the black family needing to be repaired and that being a very important issue. But we got to look, in terms of like the number one issue, I don't think that that's the issue. I think that that is a symptom of a larger problem in our community. That's the way I see it.
Hold on a second. Somebody in your chat room is saying, Obsidian, that's BS. You can't be pro-swirl talking about your pro-black family. When was I pro-swirl? I'm sorry. When was I pro-swirl? My official, and since we're on this black issue, let me directly address it. My official position regarding swirling, as it's known, interracial relationships, is this: as an American, the matter has been settled. 1967, more recently, President Donald J. Trump pardoned Jack Johnson. So as an American citizen, I see that as a matter of First Amendment, freedom of association. It's a private matter. If a black man or black woman wants to have a mate of another race, that's their personal business. The reality is, for whatever reason, most black people mate with other black people. Black men mate with black women mate with black men. So the real issue here is the lack of family among black Americans. And it's interesting, nobody wants to talk about that. Black folks don't want to talk about that. We'll talk about racism till the cows come home, but we won't talk about families.
Yeah, I mean, first of
Why
all,
not?
I agree that family is a very important issue. I'm not going to downplay that or anything like that. But it's like when you look at the bigger picture, you will see that all these things, a lot of these problems that we face are tied to our history. You can't ignore hundreds of years of being enslaved. You can't ignore decades of Jim Crow. All of those things play a role. And then even if you want to—
So they played a role. How come black folks were more married a century ago than they are today?
Like, even if you buy into your argument about like these social programs being responsible for the breakup of the family, that's a larger issue than just like black. Okay,
so if what you're saying is true, if Jim Crow, the Klan, slavery at all is a major factor for why things are today, then please explain to me how a century ago, when Jim Crow, racism, you name it, was at its height, there were more black families. The black marital rate was magnitudes higher than it is today. Please explain that to me.
Right. So, I mean, your question about the black family, I mean, it's a valid question. You did have marriages during slavery. You did have more marriages during, the Jim Crow era. Nobody's denying that. We see that there's just an overall erosion of family life in general. Is the black community is like the canary in the mine. Problems in society affect us first and most dramatically. And, the erosion of the family is something that's happening in the larger American society. We see an erosion of traditional family values and all of that. We see a lot of, single parent households and many groups of people, but of course, it's a larger rate in the black community. So that deals with, the erosion of the family is a separate question from these racial questions.
No, it's not.
Talking about in this.
No, it's not. And I'll prove it. All of the murderers, I'm talking about street crime, violent crime, rapists, murderers, aggravated assaults, home invasions. You want to know where they come from? They come from baby mama-led homes, just like what happened on the 5100 Street of 5100 block of Malcolm Street here in the city of Philadelphia, Southwest Philly, zip code 19143. That's where they're coming from.
So, and then, I mean,
more than anyone else in American life.
Okay, so I get what you're saying, but the fact of the matter is, you yourself acknowledge that most of these crimes are committed in poor neighborhoods. So, the economics play.
No, I didn't acknowledge that.
I mean, first
what
of all,
I acknowledged was that they were coming from baby mama-led homes. And
all that kind of stuff. So the fact of the matter is, most of these people who are committing this violence that you're complaining about are poor people.
No, they're coming from baby mama-led homes.
But these are poor families.
No, they're coming from baby mama-led homes. It's a lack of values. And I never hear you guys talk about values. You never talk about it. Why?
Just relax, man. I mean, relax.
No, I'm passionate because I give a damn about black people. You always want to try to paint it as if black people like me hate black people. No, who really hates black people here? Really? Who are the real ones who don't like black people? I give a damn.
All right. So you said your piece. Let me just say this. I mean, first of all, like, your whole analysis ignores the economics and how that impacts crime. First of all, the erosion of family deals with economics as well in this modern society. If someone doesn't have the financial means to support a family, they're less likely to get married. And how
do you build up wealth? How do you do that? By getting married.
Hold on.
That's how you do it.
So you have an economic situation where people don't have the means to provide for a family and all that.
How do you build up wealth?
That helps perpetuate the destruction.
How do you build up wealth?
Let me finish my point. So you have that situation where you have, men that aren't in a position to provide for their families, and you have people without certain resources. So those kind of people are more likely to engage in a drug trade, a trade that involves violence, that there's a need for people to defend their particular trade if they're involved in drugs and all that kind of stuff through violence. It's a situation where you're ignoring the economic dimension to this thing. You're just
actually, I'm not
solely on the family.
Actually, I'm not. How do you build up wealth?
I mean, you build up wealth in many ways. Like one thing is
the way you can build up wealth in America for most people, most of the time you get married. You get married, you stay married, you work together, you save together, you plan together. That's how you build up wealth. You buy a home, you have a small business, you save together, you work together. That's how you build up wealth. That's how you do it. You want to know the reason why so many black folks are poor? Because so many black folks are single. Yeah, and one of the biggest ways to be poor and to die poor and to pass that poverty on to your kids and their kids is to be a baby mama. That's a fact.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not disputing that, family, being married helps build wealth. I'm not disputing that. Like, there's all kinds of studies that talk about like how when people are married, they have more finances. But the fact of the matter is, like, most of the people that are married are people of means. Like, a poor person marrying another poor person is not going to necessarily lead to wealth. I mean,
no, but it won't mean that they'll be poor either.
Your whole analysis
Williams talked about that.
Your whole analysis about wealth ignores, like, decades of redlining and all that kind of stuff, which cut out the black community from economic development and the wealth that you're talking about.
How did you have the black middle class? How do you explain that?
First of all, those kind of redlining policies led to these so-called ghettos that.
Okay, so how do you explain the black middle class? The black middle class has existed going back to this time a century ago. So how did they exist?
So, I mean, you had individuals that were able to overcome certain things, and then you also had policies, civil rights policies, passed that gave black people more economic opportunity, gave black people protections of law, like, the right to sue for employment discrimination. They were given opportunities to higher education through programs like affirmative action, which you're complaining about. There are all kinds of explanations for the increase in the black middle class. Now, the black middle class was nowhere near the size that it is today. I mean, compared to what it was under Jim Crow.
And what's the defining feature of the black middle class?
Like, you like to romanticize the Jim.
What is the defining feature of the black middle class then or now? What's the defining feature?
I mean, it's not one defining feature. One of the defining features is education. Like, a lot of the black.
No, one of the defining features is marriage.
I mean, education is a key component.
Marriage.
I mean, it's like you create questions and then you want to.
No, this is empirically documented. So, now, education does play a role. I will agree with you. Yeah, education does play a role. The higher the education, the more likely you are to get married. So you are right about that.
Exactly. Yeah, if you're educated, you're more likely to get married. First of all, you're more likely to have financial means. And the increase of educational opportunity, whether we're talking about like the desegregation of certain schools, which created more opportunity for education, combined with affirmative action, help expand the black middle class, and expand, opportunities for people to do certain things and live certain lifestyles. But man, I want to thank you for joining this hangout. I know we don't agree on a lot of issues. But I at least appreciate the fact that you had the heart to come on here and debate me, man to man, share your views and all that kind of stuff.
Oh man, this is great. We got to continue it next week over at my place. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me on, and thanks for everybody in the chat room. I appreciate it. We need to have more conversations, not less. That's the goal.
Yeah, so we can definitely do that. I look forward to being on your channel, but again, like, hopefully you will, extend the same kind of courtesy that I tried.
No problem. It'll be the same way, same format, just you and I, mano a mano.
Okay. All right, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. And I want to shout out O'Shea for his donation. And there were a couple of other people that made donations. I want to shout out to you all for making your donation. I want to shout out everyone in the chat room who joined this hangout and, provided your commentary. I'm sorry we didn't have enough time to get to your comments. I know O'Shea the brother Obsidian brought a lot of his people here, but, I appreciate that. So again, I want to thank you for, coming on, Obsidian, and I look forward to joining you in a discussion on your channel.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Peace.
All right, man. Peace.